The wind howled across the Montana plains like a wounded animal, sharp enough to cut through leather and bone. Snow fell in thick blankets, obliterating the boundary between earth and sky until the world became nothing but white. December 20th, 1878. The temperature had dropped to 28 below zero, and the 8 miles back to the Brennan Ranch stretched ahead like a frozen eternity. Cole Brennan squinted through the swirling blizzard, his weathered face a mask of concentration as he guided his team of horses along what he hoped was still the road. 36 years of hard living showed in every line of his face, every gray thread in his dark hair. The scar running down his left cheek, a gift from Chancellorsville 15 years past, had turned white against his wind-burned skin. His pocket watch read 6:30, though the darkening sky suggested a later hour. Behind him in the wagon bed, 6-year-old Emma slept beneath a pile of wool blankets, her small face peaceful despite the storm's fury. Her golden curls peeked out from beneath the covers, so like her mother's, that sometimes it caused him physical pain to look at her. Margaret had been gone 6 years now, taken by childbed fever 3 days after Emma's birth. 6 years of raising a daughter alone. 6 years of being both father and mother to a little girl who asked questions he couldn't answer and needed tenderness he didn't know how to give. Cole adjusted the buffalo robe across his lap, a gift from his Blackfoot friend Nathan Cross back in '69 when he first arrived in the territory. The Springfield model, 1873 trapdoor carbine rested at his side in its leather scabbard, the brass plate worn smooth from years of handling. The weapon had saved his life more times than he cared to remember, both during the war and in the decade since. Union cavalry. Gettysburg, Chancellorsville, the Wilderness. Battles that felt like they'd happened to someone else in some other lifetime. The wagon lurched as one wheel dropped into a hidden rut, nearly sending Cole from his seat. He steadied himself, cursing under his breath in a way Margaret would have scolded him for. As he regained control, something dark caught his eye through the curtain of snow. Not a tree or rock, but something else entirely. Something that didn't belong in this wasteland of white. A body. Cole pulled the reins sharply, the horses snorting clouds of steam as they came to a reluctant halt. Years of experience told him to keep moving. Out here, strangers meant trouble. A broken-down traveler could be bait for ambush. Bandits were known to use women as lures for unsuspecting Good Samaritans. Yet something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was the unnatural stillness of the form, or the way the snow had only partially covered it, suggesting it hadn't been there long. "Papa." Emma's voice drifted from the back of the wagon, thick with sleep. "Why are we stopping? Stay under those blankets." Cole's tone left no room for argument. "I need to check something." He climbed down from the wagon, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. The cold bit at his face like a living thing as he approached the dark shape, his right hand instinctively moving to rest on the handle of his Colt single-action Army revolver. The weight of it was reassuring, familiar. 45 caliber, 6 shots. One chamber kept empty for safety, the way his sergeant had taught him during the war. As the form came into focus through the driving snow, he saw it was indeed a person, curled on their side beneath a torn canvas tarp. A woman. Her face was pale as moonlight, lips tinged blue from cold. Dark hair spilled across the snow like spilled ink, partially frozen to the ground. Cole knelt beside her, pulling off his glove and pressing 2 fingers to her throat, feeling for a pulse. For a moment, nothing. Then faint but present, a flutter beneath his fingertips. Alive. Barely. "Ma'am." His deep voice was almost lost in the wind. "Can you hear me?" No response. Her eyelids didn't even flutter. Cole leaned closer, noticing details his initial assessment had missed. Her clothing was of good quality, though dirty and torn. A wool dress, not the calico most frontier women wore. The fabric alone would have cost $20 in town. More concerning were the angry red marks circling both wrists. Rope burns. Deep ones. Someone had bound this woman, and recently. As he shifted her slightly, checking for visible injuries, his hand came away sticky with half-frozen blood. A wound on her right shoulder just below her collarbone. Not fresh, but not properly tended either. Cole had seen enough gunshot wounds during the war to recognize one. Small caliber from the look of it, roughly 3 or 4 days old. The bullet had passed clean through, which was fortunate, but the wound showed signs of infection. Red streaks radiated from the entry point, and the flesh around it felt hot even through her dress. This woman hadn't simply gotten lost in the storm. She was running from something. Or someone. Cole made his decision in the space of a heartbeat. He couldn't leave her to Dean, regardless of what trouble might follow. He removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around her still form before lifting her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, a fact that heightened his concern. How long had she been out here? How long without food or proper shelter? Her body was cold as stone, her breathing so shallow he had to watch carefully to see her chest rise and fall. He carried her to the wagon where Emma now sat upright, eyes wide with curiosity and concern. The little girl's face appeared between the blankets like a small moon. "Is she an angel, Papa?" Emma whispered as Cole placed the unconscious woman beside her. "Mama said angels sleep in the snow sometimes." The words struck Cole like a fist to the chest. Margaret had used to tell Emma that story every winter. When the first snow fell, she'd point to the white-covered fields and say the angels were dancing. That's why everything went quiet. The angels needed silence for their dance. After Margaret died, Emma had decided her mother had become one of those snow angels, watching over them from the winter sky. "Don't know yet, sweetheart." Cole tucked the blankets around both of them, making sure Emma's small body was pressed close to the woman for warmth. "But she needs heat, so you stay close to her. Understand?" Emma nodded solemnly, taking her responsibility with the characteristic seriousness she brought to everything. At 6 years old, she already understood that life was fragile, that people could be there one moment and gone the next. She'd learned that lesson the day her mother died, even if she'd been too young to remember it. Cole climbed back onto the driver's seat, snapping the reins. The horses, Daisy and Thunder, lurched forward into the storm with renewed urgency, as if sensing their cargo's desperate need for shelter. They were good animals, 8 and 6 years old respectively, and they knew the way home even when the road disappeared beneath the snow. Cole had raised Thunder from a foal, broken him to saddle and harness himself. The gelding trusted him absolutely. As they traveled, Cole's mind raced with questions about the mysterious woman. Someone had hurt her, shot her, tied her up, left her to die in the worst blizzard Montana had seen in a decade. That suggested either great cruelty or great desperation. Either way, whoever had done this might come looking. And Cole Brennan, former cavalry sergeant turned hermit rancher, would be standing between them and their target. The Brennan cabin appeared through the snow like a ghost, a solid shape gradually taking form amidst the swirling white. It wasn't merely a cabin, but a small fortress. After Margaret's death, Cole had built an 8-foot fence surrounding the property, complete with a heavy gate that could be barred from the inside. Physical security was something he understood. You built strong walls, you kept your weapons clean and ready, you watched the horizon for threats. These were things a soldier could do, practical matters that didn't require him to understand a little girl's tears or know the right words to say when she woke up crying for her mama. He guided the wagon through the gate, then secured it behind them before unhitching the horses and leading them to the small barn. Even in his haste to get the woman inside, he took the time to rub down Daisy and Thunder properly, to give them grain and fresh hay. A man who didn't care for his animals in this country didn't survive long. The horses had carried them safely through the storm. They'd earned their comfort. Only then did Cole return to the wagon and lift the unconscious woman once more. Emma had already climbed down and was holding the cabin door open, her small face pinched with worry in the yellow glow of lamplight. Inside, the cabin was blessedly warm. Cole had banked the fire carefully before leaving for town that morning, and coals still glowed in the stone fireplace he'd built with his own hands 2 years ago. The space was simple but solid. One main room with the fireplace, a rough-hewn table and 3 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner where Cole slept. Emma's smaller room was through a doorway to the left, barely big enough for her little bed, in the wooden chest that held her clothes and treasures. Cole laid the woman on his bed, the only proper sleeping place in the cabin. He'd take the floor tonight. Wouldn't be the first time. He'd slept in worse places during the war, in mud and blood, and places he tried not to remember. "Emma, get blankets from your room. All of them. And put the kettle on." The little girl scurried to obey, pleased to have a task, a way to help. Cole turned his attention to the fire, adding split pine logs carefully selected from the stack he'd spent months drying. Proper firewood could mean the difference between survival and death in a Montana winter. Pine burned hot and fast. Oak burned slow and steady. You needed to know which to use and when. The flames caught quickly, filling the cabin with golden light and blessed heat. Cole pulled his chair close to the bed and began the careful process of warming the woman. He knew from his army days the dangers of warming frostbitten flesh too quickly. Shock could kill as surely as the cold itself. He started with her hands, removing her wet gloves and rubbing them gently between his own calloused palms, coaxing blood back into her fingertips. Her hands were surprisingly soft, unmarked by calluses or rough work. Not the hands of a farmer's wife or a laundress or any of the dozen hard labor jobs women did on the frontier. These were the hands of someone accustomed to easier work. Or perhaps no work at all. Another mystery to add to the growing pile. The woman's eyelids fluttered. Then suddenly they snapped open, revealing wild, terrified eyes the color of storm clouds. For a heartbeat, she simply stared at him, her pupils huge with fear. Then she gasped and shoved him away with unexpected strength, scrambling backward until her spine pressed against the cabin wall. "Don't touch me." Her voice was hoarse but commanding, each word a blade. Her breathing came in ragged bursts, her whole body tense for fight or flight. Cole raised his hands slowly, palms out, making himself as non-threatening as possible. He'd seen this kind of fear before, in soldiers who'd been captured, in women who'd survived Indian raids. The fear of someone who'd been hurt badly and expected more hurt to come. "You're safe." His voice was quiet, steady, the same tone he'd used to calm a spooked horse. "You were half frozen out there. I brought you here to warm up. You're in my cabin, my ranch, 15 miles southeast of Silver Ridge." Her gaze darted around the room in quick, assessing movements. The fireplace, the simple table, the rifles mounted on the wall. Her eyes widened further when she spotted Emma standing in the doorway with an armful of blankets, her small face solemn with concern. "Who are you?" The woman's demand carried authority despite her weakened state. "Cole Brennan. This is my daughter, Emma." The woman's hand moved instinctively to her side, where Cole suspected she'd been carrying a weapon before she lost it. Finding nothing, her expression flickered between fear and resignation. "Where am I?" she asked again, though some of the panic had ebbed from her voice at the sight of the child. "My ranch. About 15 miles southeast of Silver Ridge." Recognition flashed in her eyes at the town's name, followed immediately by dread. That reaction told Cole everything he needed to know. She knew Silver Ridge, and she was terrified of someone there. "How long was I out there?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "Can't say for certain. Found you about an hour back." Cole nodded toward her wrists, where the rope burns were clearly visible in the firelight, angry red welts against pale skin. "Someone tied you up." The woman pulled her sleeves down hurriedly, covering the marks. "That's none of your concern. Becomes my concern when I bring trouble into my home." Cole's voice was gentle but firm. "My daughter lives here." Something in his words, or perhaps the way he glanced protectively at Emma, seemed to reach through the woman's fear. Her expression softened as she looked at the little girl, who still stood clutching the blankets, uncertain whether to approach. "I made tea." Emma's small voice filled the silence. She held up a tin cup with both hands, steam rising from its surface in delicate curls. "Mama taught me how before she became an angel." The simple, earnest statement seemed to break something in the woman's carefully maintained guard. Her face crumpled for just a moment before she regained control. But Cole saw it, raw grief recognizing itself in a child's words. This woman knew about loss, about the kind of pain that changed you forever. "Thank you." The woman's voice was barely above a whisper as she extended a trembling hand to accept the cup. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma Margaret Brennan. I'm 6 3/4. How old are you?" "Old enough to know better than to get shot." A ghost of a smile touched the woman's lips, gone almost before it appeared. "Papa can fix it," Emma said matter-of-factly. "He fixed my arm when I fell from the apple tree. And he was a soldier. Soldiers know about getting shot." The woman's gaze swung back to Cole, reassessing him with new information. "You were military?" "Union cavalry." Cole saw no reason to hide it, though that was a lifetime ago. The woman sipped her tea, her shoulders gradually relaxing as warmth returned to her body. She studied Cole for a long moment, and he could almost see her mind working, calculating risks, weighing options. Finally, she spoke. My name is Abigail. Cole suspected it wasn't her full name, but it was a start, a peace offering of sorts. He nodded once in acknowledgement. Well, Abigail, the storm's getting worse. You're welcome to stay until it passes. No charge, no expectations, just simple Christian charity. How long will that be? Abigail glanced toward the window where snow pelted the glass like tiny fists demanding entry. 3 days? Maybe 4. Cole flexed his left knee slightly, feeling the familiar ache. Old war injury from a mini-ball that had shattered the bone. Never lies about weather. Big storm coming behind this one. Abigail's face fell slightly, but she nodded. When it clears, I'll leave. I need to reach Fort Benton. That's 90 miles north. In winter, through mountain passes that'll be choked with snow. Alone and wounded. Cole kept his voice neutral, but his meaning was clear. It would be suicide. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice, ma'am. Question is whether you're willing to live with the consequences. Before Abigail could respond, Emma spoke up again, her young voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years. Are you running from bad men? The direct question hung in the air. Cole started to tell Emma not to pry, but Abigail beat him to an answer. Yes, sweetheart, very bad men. Will Papa protect you? Emma asked, her blue eyes moving between the two adults. Like he protected me from the wolf last summer? Cole remembered that day with crystal clarity. A young wolf, probably driven from its pack, had gotten into the chicken coop. Emma had gone to collect eggs and surprised it. The wolf, cornered and desperate, had turned on her. Cole had heard her scream and came running, rifle in hand. He'd shot the wolf mid-leap, the bullet taking it through the heart before it could reach his daughter. Emma hadn't even cried. She just looked at him with those solemn eyes and said, Thank you, Papa, if need be. Cole's response to Emma was simple, honest. Though I reckon these bad men are more dangerous than any wolf. Abigail set down her teacup, her storm gray eyes meeting his directly. Why would you risk that? You don't know me. For all you know, I could be the criminal they're chasing. Could be, Cole agreed, but I've seen enough of the world to tell the difference between a victim and a villain. Those rope burns didn't tie themselves. That bullet wound in your shoulder didn't shoot itself. And women who deserve what's coming to them don't usually have terror in their eyes when they wake up. The blunt assessment seemed to surprise Abigail into silence. She looked down at her hands, the teacup warming her palms, and for a moment Cole thought she might cry. But when she looked up again, her eyes were dry, her jaw set with determination. His name is Victor Ashford. He owns the bank in Silver Ridge, and half the town besides. My husband discovered he was using the hospital to distribute opium-based tonics, poisoning people for profit. My husband confronted him, and 3 days later, my husband was dead. The words came out flat, rehearsed, as if she'd told this story before or practiced telling it to herself. Cole recognized that particular cadence. He'd used it himself when talking about Margaret's death. Sometimes the only way to speak about unbearable things was to drain all emotion from the words. And now Ashford wants you dead too, Cole concluded. Not just dead, discredited. He had me committed to the asylum ward of our own hospital. Claimed grief over my husband's death had driven me mad. I was kept sedated for days before I managed to escape. The clinical way she described her imprisonment chilled Cole more than any amount of emotion would have. This was a woman who'd been through hell and come out the other side changed, hardened, but not broken, not yet. Emma had moved closer during this exchange, and now she climbed onto the bed beside Abigail, her small hand reaching out to touch the woman's arm. You're safe now. Papa won't let the bad man get you, he promised. Abigail looked at the child, and this time the tears did come, silent tracks down her pale cheeks. She didn't brush them away, just let them fall as she placed her hand over Emma's small one. You have a very brave daughter, Mr. Brennan. Call me Cole, and yes, I do. Gets it from her mother. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the wind howling outside. Cole stood and moved to the window, ostensibly to check the storm's progress, but really to give Abigail a moment to collect herself and to think. Victor Ashford. Cole knew the name, though he'd never had direct dealings with the man during his 2 years as Silver Ridge's sheriff. Ashford had been too smart, too careful to get his own hands dirty. He'd operated through proxies and intermediaries, always maintaining plausible deniability. But Cole had heard the whispers: disappearing money, suspicious deaths. People who crossed Ashford tended to have accidents or simply vanish. Cole had resigned as sheriff in '76, 2 years after Margaret's death, when Emma turned 4. He'd seen too much corruption, too many powerful men like Ashford who believed the law didn't apply to them. He'd grown tired of fighting battles he couldn't win, of watching guilty men walk free while honest people suffered. So he'd walked away, bought this land, built this cabin, and tried to create a world small enough that he could protect it. Now trouble had found him anyway, arriving in the form of a half-frozen woman with terror in her eyes. "You hungry?" Cole asked, turning back from the window. "Got venison stew left over from last night." Abigail nodded gratefully. "I can't remember the last time I ate." While Cole heated the stew over the fire, Emma showed Abigail her collection of treasures: river rocks and pine cones, a shed snake skin, a piece of petrified wood with the imprint of ancient ferns still visible in its surface. The little girl explained each item with the seriousness of a museum curator, and Abigail listened with what appeared to be genuine interest. "This one has tiny animals inside." Emma held up a piece of limestone full of fossil crinoids, from when the ocean was here. Abigail took the rock, examining it closely in the firelight. "These are crinoid fossils. Sea lilies, some people call them. You're right that this was once underwater, probably millions of years ago. You have a very good eye for scientific specimens." "What scientific specimens?" Emma asked, delighted by the new words. "Objects that teach us about the natural world. Rocks, plants, animals. Things we can study to understand how the world works." "Papa says I ask too many questions," Emma admitted. "But I want to know things. Never stop asking questions." Abigail's voice was fierce suddenly. "The world tries to make women small and quiet, especially little girls. Don't let it. Keep asking. Keep wondering. Keep demanding answers." Cole listened to this exchange as he stirred the stew, surprised by the passion in Abigail's words. This woman was educated, well-spoken, clearly from a background of some privilege. What was her full story? How had she ended up married to a doctor in a rough Montana mining town? What had she left behind to come here? He ladled stew into 3 bowls and brought them to the table. The meal was simple but filling. Venison he'd shot 2 weeks ago, carrots and potatoes from the root cellar beneath the cabin, wild onions and herbs. As they ate, some color returned to Abigail's pale cheeks. She tried to eat slowly, but her hunger was obvious. Cole silently gave her most of his portion, claiming he'd eaten a large lunch in town. After dinner, Emma grew drowsy, her head nodding despite her efforts to stay awake and keep listening to the adults talk. Cole carried her to her small room and tucked her into bed, pulling the quilts up under her chin. Margaret had made those quilts, sitting by this very fire during her pregnancy, her hands moving in steady, practiced motions while she sang softly to herself. "Papa?" Emma's voice was thick with sleep. "Is Dr. Abby going to stay with us?" "Dr. Abby?" Cole smiled slightly at the nickname his daughter had already assigned their guest. "I don't know, sweetheart. That's up to her. I hope she does. It's nice having a lady here again. Someone who smells good and knows about rocks and doesn't just talk about horses and weather." The simple observation struck Cole with unexpected force. In his efforts to keep Emma safe, to provide for her physical needs, he'd never considered what she might be missing. Female companionship, a woman's perspective, the things a mother would teach a daughter that he didn't even know he didn't know. "Get some sleep, Emma. Morning comes early." He kissed her forehead and returned to the main room where Abigail sat staring into the fire. She'd removed her wet outer dress and wore only a simple cotton undergarment that preserved her modesty while allowing her wounded shoulder some relief. The bandage he'd glimpsed earlier was crude, already soaked through with blood and pus. That wound needs proper attention. Cole gestured toward her shoulder. "I've got some medical supplies. Learned field medicine during the war." Abigail hesitated, then nodded. "I'd be grateful. I've been managing as best I could, but it's difficult to treat one's own back and shoulder." Cole gathered his supplies. Whiskey for disinfecting, clean cloth for bandages, a needle and thread, if stitches were needed, and a tin of salve made from herbs Nathan Cross had taught him to prepare. Comfrey and yarrow and other plants whose names he couldn't pronounce but knew by sight and smell. This might hurt. Cole warned as he cut away the old bandage. I'm a physician. Abigail's response was matter of fact. Well, I know exactly how much it's going to hurt. That revelation stopped Cole's hands mid-motion. A physician. That explained the soft hands, the educated speech, the way she'd examined Emma's fossil with professional interest. It also raised more questions. Female doctors were rare even in eastern cities, virtually unheard of on the frontier. Harvard Medical School, class of 1870. Abigail supplied the information without being asked, perhaps reading his thoughts on his face. One of 3 women in my class. My husband, Jonathan, was the only male student who treated me as a colleague rather than a curiosity. As Cole cleaned the wound with whiskey, Abigail barely flinched, confirming her claim of medical knowledge. She knew what was coming and had steeled herself against it. The bullet had indeed passed clean through, which was fortunate. The wound was infected but not severely. With proper care, it should heal. You did good work on yourself, considering. Cole applied the herb salve, noting how the angry redness already seemed to diminish slightly at its touch. Most people would have panicked, made it worse. Most people haven't spent 3 years learning anatomy and surgery. Abigail's attempt at levity was undercut by the pain in her voice. Though I'll admit, operating on oneself while delirious from blood loss and fear is not something they taught us at Harvard. As he worked, Cole noticed a thin gold chain around Abigail's neck, disappearing beneath her undergarment. A locket or pendant of some kind, though he couldn't see what. None of his business in any case. People were entitled to their private grief, their secret treasures. Done. He tied off the fresh bandage securely. Keep it clean and dry. Change the dressing daily. If you start seeing red streaks spreading from the wound, that's blood poisoning. But I think you caught it in time. Thank you. The simple words carried more weight than their syllables suggested. They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the storm had reached its full fury, wind shrieking around the cabin corners like a living thing. Snow would be piling in drifts 6 feet high by morning. No one would be traveling in this. Not Ashford's men, not anyone. They were sealed in here together, 3 people in a wooden box surrounded by a white wilderness that killed the unprepared without mercy or malice. Cole. Abigail's voice was quiet but steady. Why are you really doing this? Helping me, I mean. You could have left me there. Should have, by any reasonable calculation. Instead, you're risking your home, your safety, your daughter's future for a complete stranger. Why? Cole considered the question, staring into the flames. Why indeed? Simple Christian charity was the easy answer, but not the whole truth. Margaret would have wanted him to help, certainly. She'd believed in doing right even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. But Margaret had been dead 6 years, and Cole had spent most of that time keeping the world at arm's length, protecting the small circle of his daughter and his land, and asking nothing more. Maybe I'm tired of being afraid, he said finally, the words surprising him even as he spoke them. After Margaret died, I built these walls. This fence, I told myself it was to keep Emma safe, and that's true enough. But it was also to keep the world out, to avoid feeling anything that might hurt the way losing Margaret hurt. Then tonight I saw you lying there in the snow, and I thought about Emma. What if someday she needed help, and everyone just rode past because it was easier, safer, to mind their own business? The confession hung in the air between them. Cole rarely spoke so many words at once, and never about his feelings. But something about this night, this storm, this stranger had loosened his tongue. Your daughter calls you Papa, Abigail observed gently. Not father or daddy, Papa. That's what my students at Harvard called their fathers. It's what my own father preferred. It's not a frontier word, not really. Where are you from originally? Cole smiled slightly at her perceptiveness. Connecticut, born and raised in New Haven. My father was a professor of theology at Yale, classical languages, ancient texts, all that. I disappointed him considerably by joining the army instead of following him into academia. And your wife? Boston. Margaret Ashworth before we married. We met during the war. I was recovering from my knee wound at a hospital where she was volunteering. She was supposed to marry some banker's son, secure her family's future. Instead, she ran off with a wounded soldier who had nothing but his army pay and a head full of bad memories. Abigail smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. She sounds like she was remarkable. She was. The understatement of the century, but Cole couldn't find better words. Margaret had been light and life and laughter. Everything he wasn't. She'd seen something in him worth saving, worth loving, and he'd never quite understood what. They fell silent again, but it was a companionable quiet now. The initial tension and wariness had eased. Not gone entirely, that would take time, but softened. Two wounded people, sheltering from different storms. Eventually, Abigail's eyes began to droop. The trauma of the day, the warmth of the cabin, and her body's need for healing were overwhelming her determination to stay awake and alert. "You should sleep." Cole stood and gestured to the bed. "Take the bed tonight. I'll make up a pallet by the fire." "I can't take your bed," Abigail protested weakly. "You've already done so much. You're injured and half frozen. The bed is yours. That's the end of it." He gathered blankets and fashioned a makeshift bed on the floor near the hearth. It wouldn't be comfortable, but he'd slept in worse conditions. The important thing was keeping the fire fed through the night, making sure the cabin stayed warm enough that Abigail's recovery wasn't set back by cold. As he settled onto his pallet, Abigail's voice came from the darkness of the bed. "Cole, thank you for everything, for not leaving me, for giving me hope that there are still good men in the world. Get some rest. Morning will be here before you know it." But sleep eluded Cole for a long time. He lay staring at the rafters, watching firelight dance across the rough wood, and thought about the choice he'd made tonight. Bringing Abigail Carter into his home had likely signed his death warrant if Ashford decided to come after her in force. The man had money, influence, hired guns. Cole had determination and a well-maintained rifle. The odds weren't favorable. Yet he couldn't bring himself to regret the decision. For the first time in 6 years, he'd done something that felt right. Not safe, not smart, but right. And maybe that was what Margaret had always tried to teach him. That rightness mattered more than safety. That some things were worth the risk. The storm raged on through the night, and 3 people slept in a cabin surrounded by winter's fury, their fates now intertwined, whether they wished it or not. Dawn came without announcement, the storm clouds too thick to allow more than a gray half-light to penetrate. Cole woke as he always did, instantly alert. His soldier's instincts never quite dormant, even after 13 years of civilian life. The fire had burned down to embers during the night, and his breath misted in the cold air as he quietly added fresh wood, coaxing the flames back to life. Abigail still slept, her breathing deep and regular. Good. Her body needed rest to heal. Emma would sleep another hour at least, enjoying the rare luxury of a morning without chores demanding her immediate attention. The storm had granted them a reprieve from the normal rhythms of ranch life. Cole pulled on his coat and boots and slipped outside to check on the animals. The cold hit him like a fist, stealing his breath. The thermometer outside the door read 32 below zero. The storm had diminished slightly during the night, but snow still fell steadily, adding to drifts that already reached past his knees in places. The 8-foot fence posts were barely visible, white humps in an endless expanse of white. He made his way to the barn, following the rope he'd strung between buildings for exactly this purpose. In a blizzard, a man could lose his way between his house and his barn, freeze to death 20 feet from safety. Montana winters killed the careless and the unprepared without discrimination. Daisy and Thunder nickered softly as he entered, stamping their feet in their stalls. The barn held the warmth of their bodies and the rich smell of hay and horse. Cole fed them grain and fresh hay, checked their water, ran his hands over their legs, checking for any swelling or injury from yesterday's hard pull through the storm. Both animals were sound, tough Montana stock, bred for this climate. The chickens in their sheltered coop complained loudly about the cold and the late breakfast. Cole scattered feed and collected 7 eggs, warm from the hens' bodies. Emma would be pleased. She took pride in her chickens, had named each one, mourned when a fox or coyote took one, despite Cole's best efforts at protection. As he worked, his mind returned again and again to the problem of Abigail Carter. Dr. Abigail Carter, he corrected himself, Harvard-educated, widowed, running for her life from one of the most powerful men in the territory. And now, under his roof, his protection, whether he was adequate to the task or not. The real question wasn't whether Victor Ashford would come after her. The man had already tried to kill her once, had hunted her into a blizzard and left her to freeze. No, the question was when he would come and how many men he would bring. Cole had some advantages. He knew this land. He had good sight lines from the cabin to the tree line. His Springfield could drop a man at 400 yards. His Colt was reliable to 50. He had ammunition, food stores, water from the well. If it came to a siege, he could hold out for weeks. But Emma, everything came back to Emma. He couldn't risk his daughter in a gunfight with hired killers, which meant Abigail's plan of reaching Fort Benton and the federal marshal station there was really their only option. They just had to survive long enough to make the journey. When he returned to the cabin, both Abigail and Emma were awake. The little girl had taken it upon herself to help their guest, bringing her fresh water, helping her sit up against the pillows Cole had arranged. Abigail's color was better this morning, the deathly pallor replaced by a more natural, if still pale, complexion. "How's the shoulder?" Cole asked, setting down the basket of eggs. "Painful, but manageable." Abigail moved it experimentally, wincing slightly. "You do good work, Cole Brennan. I've seen battlefield surgeons do worse. Learn from necessity. Too many good men died from infected wounds that should have healed. After a while, you pick up the knowledge or watch your friends die." Powerful motivator. Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Papa, I showed Dr. Abby how to feed the fire. She said, I'm very responsible." "You are indeed." Cole ruffled his daughter's hair affectionately. "Why don't you help me make breakfast?" "I'm thinking flapjacks." The little girl's face lit up. She loved flapjacks, loved helping mix the batter, loved the ritual of Saturday morning breakfast when they had time to cook something more elaborate than porridge. For a moment, with the warmth of the cabin around them and the smell of coffee beginning to fill the air, Cole could almost forget the danger lurking beyond their walls. As he and Emma worked at the stove, Abigail rose carefully from the bed, moving to the table. She wore one of Margaret's old dresses that Cole had found for her, simple blue calico that Margaret had worn for everyday work. It fit Abigail reasonably well, perhaps a bit loose through the shoulders. Seeing another woman in Margaret's dress should have bothered him more than it did. Instead, it felt somehow right, as if Margaret would have approved. "Cole, I need to tell you the full truth." Abigail's voice was quiet but steady. "Last night I gave you pieces of the story, but you deserve to know everything if you're going to help me. If you're going to risk Emma." He glanced at his daughter, but she was absorbed in stirring the batter, counting each rotation aloud. 23, 24, 25. "Go on." Cole poured coffee for both of them, strong and black. Abigail cupped the tin mug in both hands, drawing warmth from it. "My husband Jonathan Carter and I came to Silver Ridge in the spring of 1876. Jonathan had inherited $8,000 from his father, and he wanted to use it to build a proper hospital in an area that desperately needed one. The silver mines were expanding, bringing in hundreds of workers, and medical care was primitive at best." She paused, sipping her coffee, organizing her thoughts. "Victor Ashford approached us shortly after we arrived, offered to invest $5,000 to help complete the hospital in exchange for becoming a silent partner. At the time, it seemed like providence. The money allowed us to buy better equipment, hire nurses, build a larger facility. We were grateful. But there's no such thing as a silent partner with men like Ashford." Cole had seen this story before. No, at first everything seemed legitimate. The hospital thrived. We treated miners, ranchers, townspeople, anyone who came through our doors. Jonathan handled the administrative side while I focused on patient care. It was everything we dreamed of. Her expression darkened, and Cole saw her hands tighten around the coffee cup. Then, about 6 months ago, Jonathan noticed discrepancies in the pharmacy records. Certain medications, primarily morphine and opium derivatives, were disappearing at an alarming rate, far more than our patient records could account for. He was a thorough man, your husband. Very thorough, and honest to a fault. Abigail's voice caught slightly on the words. He investigated further and discovered that Ashford had established a side business within our hospital. He was manufacturing and distributing something called Dr. Ashford's Miracle Tonic. The formula contained 15% morphine, 40% alcohol, 2% cocaine, and various flavoring agents. He was selling it throughout 3 territories, creating thousands of addicts, all while using our legitimate hospital as both cover and supply source. Cole set down his coffee cup with more force than he intended. Emma looked over, and he forced a smile to reassure her. That's murder for profit. 47 people that we could document. Abigail's voice was flat now, clinical, the only way she could speak these facts without breaking. 47 deaths directly attributable to the tonic over the past 2 years. Heart failures, mostly. The combination of drugs and alcohol puts tremendous strain on the cardiovascular system, but it was marketed as a cure-all for pain, for melancholy, for women's complaints, for children's teething troubles. People trusted it because it came from a hospital, from a doctor. And your husband confronted Ashford. 3 days after Jonathan gathered enough evidence to prove the operation, he died. Supposedly a heart attack. He was 34 years old, Cole. 34 in perfect health, never sick a day in his life. He collapsed at breakfast, seized up, couldn't breathe. Dead in less than 5 minutes. Poison. The word hung in the air between them. Digitalin, I believe. Extracted from foxglove plants. It mimics the symptoms of heart failure perfectly. By the time I recognized what had happened, it was too late to save him. And I couldn't prove it was murder. The town doctor, who was friendly with Ashford, ruled it a natural death. So you gathered evidence to take to the federal authorities. Abigail nodded. Jonathan had kept meticulous records. Notes, pharmacy invoices, patient files, samples of the tonic itself. Everything needed to prove not just the operation, but Ashford's direct involvement. I hid the evidence and planned to take it to Fort Benton. But Ashford found out. He had me committed to the asylum ward of our own hospital. Claimed that grief over Jonathan's death had driven me to paranoid delusions. The attending physician, who was on Ashford's payroll, signing the commitment papers. I was kept sedated with laudanum for nearly a week. Cole felt a cold rage building in his chest. The methodical cruelty of it. The abuse of medical authority. This was worse than a simple killing. This was torture. The destruction of a person's credibility and sanity before silencing them permanently. How did you escape? During a shift change, one of the younger nurses forgot to lock my door properly. I was lucid enough by then to take advantage. I grabbed what evidence I could, the most damning documents small enough to carry. The rest is still in Ashford's office safe, and that's when you were shot. Yes, I made it to the river, was trying to steal a canoe to float downstream, put distance between myself and pursuit. Someone fired from the bank. The bullet hit my shoulder, knocked me into the water. I don't remember much after that, just cold, so much cold. And the current pulling me along, I must have washed up on a sandbar. By the time I came to my senses, I was miles downstream, half frozen, and night was falling. You walked in that condition? Cole tried to calculate the distance. The river was at least 12 miles from where he'd found her. I don't remember all of it clearly. Fever dreams mixed with reality. I know I followed the river north for a while, then cut west when I saw lights in the distance. Your ranch, as it turned out. Then the blizzard hit in full force and I couldn't go on. I found that tarp, tried to make some kind of shelter. The next thing I knew, I was waking up here. The recitation left Abigail looking drained, as if the telling had cost her something essential. Cole rose and brought the coffee pot to refill her cup. Behind them, Emma had finished mixing the batter and was waiting patiently for his attention. Emma, honey, go ahead and start the first batch. Remember, bubbles on top before you flip them. Yes, Papa. The little girl climbed onto the stool they'd built for her. Giving her enough height to reach the griddle safely, Cole lowered his voice, though Emma was still within earshot. This evidence you managed to bring with you. Where is it? Abigail reached up to her neck, withdrawing the gold chain he'd noticed the night before. She unfastened it and opened a small oval locket. Inside, where most women kept tiny portraits or locks of hair, was a tightly rolled cylinder of paper no thicker than a pencil. Jonathan's journal, miniaturized. He used a photographer's technique to reduce the pages to nearly microscopic size. This locket contains copies of 73 pages documenting everything. The formula for the tonic, the distribution network, coded references to payments made to officials. It's not the complete evidence, but it's enough to start a federal investigation. Cole examined the locket with new respect. Clever, very clever. But you said the rest is still in Ashford's safe? At the hospital, yeah, in his office. I know the combination. Jonathan wrote it in his journal before he died, as if he knew he might not survive. 12 right, 36 left, 9 right. I memorized it. Can you get back in there? With help, possibly. The hospital has minimal security at night, 2 guards at most, and they're usually drunk by midnight. But the office is on the 2nd floor, and the safe is a Mosler and Company model. Heavy, fireproof. We'd need to open it properly, not try to move it. Before Cole could respond, a sound froze him in place. The distinctive jingle of harness bells, muffled by snow but unmistakable. Someone was approaching the ranch. Emma. Cole's voice was quiet but commanding. Go to your room. Get under the bed. Don't come out until I call you. The little girl opened her mouth to protest, saw the look on her father's face, and obeyed instantly. She'd learned during the wolf incident that when Papa used that tone, you did exactly as he said without question. Cole moved to the window, careful to stand to the side where he couldn't be seen from outside. Through the gap in the shutters, he watched a single rider on horseback materialize from the white curtain of snow. The man sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to the saddle. He wore an expensive wool coat and a wide-brimmed hat that had probably cost more than most men earned in a month. Even from a distance, Cole recognized him. Eli Tanner, one of Ashford's enforcers. During Cole's time as sheriff, he'd never been able to pin anything specific on Tanner, but the man's reputation was well known. Quick with a gun, quicker with a knife, utterly loyal to whoever paid him, which currently meant Victor Ashford. Tanner didn't attempt to enter the property. Instead, he rode slowly along the fence line, his horse's hooves leaving deep prints in the fresh snow. He was scouting, assessing, making his presence known. After completing a circuit of the visible perimeter, he withdrew an envelope from his coat and secured it to the fence post nearest the gate. Then he tipped his hat toward the cabin in a mocking salute and turned his horse back toward town. Cole waited until the rider had disappeared completely into the storm before moving. He pulled on his coat and boots, took his rifle from its place by the door. Stay inside, lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. Abigail nodded, her face pale but composed. She understood the implications of that visit. The cold outside was brutal, the wind driving snow into his face with enough force to sting. Cole made his way to the fence post and retrieved the envelope. Heavy paper, quality stock. His name written in elegant script on the outside. He broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter. The message was brief and to the point. Brennan, your guest is wanted for questioning regarding her husband's death and the theft of valuable hospital property. Return Dr. Edwards to Silver Ridge by noon tomorrow, December 22nd, and your involvement in this matter will be overlooked. Your mortgage of $650 will be forgiven as compensation for your trouble. Refuse, and I will be forced to conclude you are harboring a fugitive with all legal consequences that entails. Choose wisely. Victor Ashford. Cole read the letter twice, committing every word to memory. The implied threats were clear enough. Ashford knew exactly where Abigail was. He knew about Cole's mortgage, which meant he'd done his research. The man had access to bank records, property deeds, probably knew more about Cole's finances than Cole did himself. The offer of mortgage forgiveness was interesting. $650 was a significant sum, more than enough to make most men seriously consider cooperation. Ashford was giving him a way out, a chance to walk away from this with his property secured and no immediate consequences. Which meant Ashford believed Cole was the type of man who could be bought. That was a miscalculation. Cole returned to the cabin, shaking snow from his coat. He handed the letter to Abigail without comment, watching her face as she read. Her expression remained neutral until she reached the end. Then for just a moment, naked despair showed in her eyes. You should take his offer. Her voice was barely audible. $650. That's your ranch, your home. Everything you've built for Emma. I have no right to ask you to sacrifice that. You're not asking, I'm choosing, Cole. Be reasonable. I'm one person. Your daughter's future is at stake. My daughter's future will be worth nothing if I teach her that we abandon people when helping them becomes inconvenient. Cole's voice was harder than he intended, and he made an effort to soften it. Besides, Ashford's word isn't worth the paper it's written on. You think he'd actually forgive the mortgage after I handed you over? More likely he'd foreclose anyway. Call it punishment for sheltering you in the first place. And even if he did honor it, what kind of man would I be? Emma's voice came from her room, small and worried. Papa, can I come out now? Yes, sweetheart. It's safe. The little girl emerged from her room, her face pinched with concern. She went straight to Abigail and climbed into her lap, a gesture of such natural trust that it made Cole's chest tighten. Is the bad man coming for Dr. Abby? Not today. Cole knelt down so he was at Emma's eye level. But sweetheart, we need to talk about something important. Dr. Abby needs to go on a trip, a dangerous trip, and I need to help her. That means you might have to stay with Mrs. Jenkins for a few days. Emma's lower lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she wrapped her arms around Abigail's neck. Don't let them hurt her, Papa. Promise. I promise. The words came out with more conviction than Cole felt. He'd made promises before. To Margaret, that he'd keep her safe. To himself, that he'd never let anyone else close enough to hurt him again. Promises had a way of breaking in this territory. Cole moved to the stove, where the flapjacks were burning, forgotten in the drama. He scraped them into the slop bucket for the pigs and started fresh. They needed to eat, to maintain their strength. And he needed the familiar rhythm of cooking to settle his thoughts and plan their next move. As he worked, Emma and Abigail sat together at the table, talking quietly. The little girl showed Abigail her slate, where she'd been practicing her letters and numbers. Abigail praised her penmanship, corrected her grip on the chalk, showed her a better way to form her B's and D's. It was such a domestic scene, so normal, that for a moment Cole could almost forget the danger circling them like wolves around a wounded deer. But the danger was real, and time was running short. Ashford had given them until noon tomorrow. That left roughly 26 hours to decide on a course of action and execute it. After breakfast, while Emma played with her rag doll in the corner, Cole and Abigail sat by the fire and discussed their options. Outside, the storm continued unabated, snow piling higher against the cabin walls. Fort Benton is 90 miles north. Abigail traced a route on the rough map Cole had drawn in the ashes of the hearth with a stick. In good weather, 4 or 5 days on horseback. In this storm, probably twice that long. If we can make it at all, there's another option. Cole drew a second line. Helena is 100 miles west. Longer distance, but the train runs there twice a week. If we can get to Helena, we can put you on a train to Fort Benton. Safer, faster, harder to intercept. But how do we get to Helena? Abigail asked. The main road will be watched. Ashford's not stupid. He'll have men positioned at every logical route out of the territory. We don't take the main road. Cole's finger traced a path through what he'd marked as wilderness. There's an old Blackfoot trail through the high country. Rough going, especially in winter, but passable if you know the way. My friend Nathan Cross used to take me hunting up there. It bypasses Silver Ridge entirely, comes out near a logging camp about 15 miles southwest of here. From there, we could get fresh horses, supplies, and continue to Helena. Abigail studied the improvised map. How long would that route take? In this weather? 5 days, maybe 6. Hard traveling. We'd be exposed, vulnerable. And we'd have to leave soon, before Ashford's men establish a full cordon around the area. What about Emma? The question hung between them. Cole had been avoiding thinking about it directly, but there was no way around it now. She goes to the Jenkins family in town. Thomas and Martha Jenkins. Good people. He runs the newspaper, the Silver Ridge Sentinel. One of the few men in town with the spine to stand up to Ashford in print. They have 3 daughters around Emma's age. She'd be safe there. And if Ashford decides to use her as leverage? Cole's jaw tightened. He won't. Even Ashford isn't stupid enough to threaten a child openly. Too many witnesses, too much potential for backlash. His power in Silver Ridge depends on people believing he's a respected businessman, not a monster. Harming a 6-year-old girl would destroy that illusion. Abigail didn't look convinced, but she nodded. So the plan is to get Emma to the Jenkins house, then make for the logging camp and eventually Helena. When do we leave? Before Cole could answer, a sound shattered the quiet. A gunshot, distant but clear, despite the storm. Then another and another. Three deliberate shots evenly spaced. Not the sound of hunting or target practice. This was a signal or a warning. Cole moved to the window again. Nothing visible through the snow. But those shots had come from the direction of town. Something had happened in Silver Ridge. Maybe Ashford is making his move early. Abigail had risen as well, her hand unconsciously moving to her wounded shoulder, testing our response. Or maybe it's not about us at all. Cole reminded himself that not everything that happened in Silver Ridge revolved around their situation. But the timing was suspicious. They waited in tense silence for several minutes, but no further shots came. No riders appeared through the storm. Eventually, Cole forced himself to relax slightly. We leave tonight, his decision was made. After dark, in the storm. It'll be harder traveling, but also harder for anyone watching to see us go. I'll take you and Emma into town, drop Emma at the Jenkins house, then you and I continue north toward the logging camp. Tonight, but the storm, the cold. Abigail looked toward the window where snow still fell heavily. The storm is our ally. Cole began gathering supplies from around the cabin, his military training taking over. Dried meat, hardtack, coffee, matches waterproofed in wax. Visibility will be nearly zero, which means Ashford's men won't see us leave. And tracks will be covered within an hour by fresh snow. What about the ranch? The animals? I'll put out enough feed and water for a week. The chickens will be fine in their coop. The horses can shelter in the barn. It's not ideal, but it's survivable. As he packed, Emma watched with wide, solemn eyes. She'd seen her father prepare for travel before, but something about his urgency communicated itself to her. This wasn't a routine supply run to town. This was different, dangerous. Papa, are we going away? Just for a little while, sweetheart. You're going to have a nice visit with the Jenkins girls. Remember Sarah and Hannah? You liked playing with them last summer. But where are you going? Away for a few days. But I'll be back. I always come back. He hoped that was a promise he could keep. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Cole checked his weapons methodically, cleaning each one, oiling the actions, counting ammunition. Springfield carbine, 40 rounds. Colt revolver, 36 rounds. A smaller revolver he'd taken off it would be Horse Thief 3 years ago, 20 rounds of .32 caliber. He gave this last to Abigail. You know how to use this? Jonathan taught me the basics. I'm not an expert, but I can hit a target at 20 feet. Then you're better prepared than most. Remember, if it comes to shooting, aim for center mass, the largest target. Don't try for a fancy shot. Abigail took the revolver, checked the cylinder, tested the weight in her hand. Her movements were careful but not fearful. Whatever else she might be, she wasn't helpless. Emma, meanwhile, packed her own small bag under Martha's earlier instructions relayed through Cole. Her best dress, her Sunday shoes, her favorite doll, and the wooden box containing her rock collection. The last item made Cole smile despite everything. His daughter had her priorities straight. As afternoon faded toward evening and the early winter dark, Cole hitched the wagon. Not ideal for the terrain they'd face, but necessary for getting through the deep snow on the initial leg of the journey. Once they reached the Jenkins house, he and Abigail would continue on horseback. They left the cabin just after sunset, though in the storm it was hard to distinguish day from night. Emma was bundled in layers of woolen fur, barely visible beneath her wrappings. Abigail wore Margaret's warmest coat and a thick shawl. Cole drove, his face wrapped against the wind, trusting Daisy and Thunder to find the road more by instinct than sight. The journey to Silver Ridge normally took 2 hours in good weather. Tonight it would take at least 4. The snow was deep enough that the horses had to high-step through it, their breath coming in labored clouds. Several times they had to stop while Cole climbed down to clear snow from in front of the wagon wheels. Emma huddled between Cole and Abigail, occasionally singing softly to herself. The song she'd been humming since Abigail arrived. Angels in the Snow. Margaret's song. Hearing it from his daughter's lips while sitting next to another woman in his dead wife's coat created a strange vertigo in Cole's chest. Past and present colliding, or maybe merging. He couldn't tell which. Halfway to town, disaster struck. The wagon wheel hit something solid beneath the snow. A rock, a stump, something immovable. There was a crack like a gunshot, and the right rear wheel splintered. The wagon lurched hard to that side, throwing all 3 of them forward. Cole managed to keep his seat, but Emma would have fallen if Abigail hadn't caught her. Whoa! Cole pulled the horses to a stop and climbed down to assess the damage. The wheel wasn't completely destroyed, but 3 spokes were cracked and the rim had split. It might hold together for another mile at walking speed, but no more than that, and they were still 3 miles from Silver Ridge. He stood in the snow, wind tearing at his coat, and calculated their options. They could try to repair the wheel, but that would take hours in this storm. They could continue on foot, but Emma couldn't walk 3 miles through snow this deep. They could abandon the wagon and all 3 ride the horses, but that meant leaving behind most of their supplies. Before he could decide, a sound reached him through the wind. Hoofbeats, multiple horses coming from the direction of Silver Ridge. Cole's hand went to his rifle. Abigail tensed in the wagon seat, her hands surely finding that .32 caliber revolver in her pocket. Emma sensed the adult's fear and pressed herself against Abigail's side. The riders materialized from the snow like ghosts. 3 men, heavily armed. For a terrible moment, Cole thought they were Ashford's men, that Eli Tanner had returned with reinforcements. Then the lead rider raised his hand in greeting, and Cole recognized him. Nathan Cross. Nathan Cross sat his paint pony with the easy grace of a man who'd spent more years in the saddle than on his feet. At 58, his face was a map of hard living, deeply lined and weathered to the color of old leather. His hair, once black as a raven's wing, had gone steel gray and hung in 2 braids beneath a battered fur hat. Mixed blood, Blackfoot and French trapper, he belonged fully to neither world and had made his peace with that fact decades ago. Behind him rode 2 younger men Cole didn't recognize. Hard-faced, capable-looking, the kind who knew their way around trouble. Both sat their horses with the relaxed alertness of men accustomed to danger. Brennan, Nathan's voice carried easily despite the wind. His sharp eyes took in the broken wagon, the bundled child, the woman in Margaret's coat. Heard you might need assistance. Cole kept his hand near his rifle. How did you hear that? Word travels, even in a blizzard, especially when Victor Ashford is involved. Nathan dismounted with fluid ease. You've stepped into something bigger than you know, my friend. This is trouble you don't need, Nathan. Nathan moved closer, his voice dropping. My sister Sarah died 8 months ago. Heart failure, the doctor said. She was 43 years old, Brennan. Healthy as a horse until she started taking Dr. Ashford's miracle tonic for headaches. 3 months later, she was dead. The words hit Cole like a physical blow. I didn't know, I'm sorry. Nathan waved off the sympathy. I've been watching Ashford for months. When I heard he'd sent men looking for the doctor woman, I put the pieces together. He glanced toward the wagon where Abigail sat watching. She's the one with evidence. Yes, good. Then you'll need help getting her to safety. Ashford's got men watching every road out of Silver Ridge. You wouldn't make it 5 miles. Nathan gestured toward his companions. These are my cousins from the Blackfoot Reservation. Running Bear and Standing Wolf. They know every trail between here and Helena. We can guide you, provide extra guns if needed. But we move now, the storm's breaking. Cole looked up. Nathan was right. The snow had begun to ease, the wind dropping. Their window of concealment was closing. What about Emma? We get her to the Jenkins house first. Nathan's tone was firm. My cousins will escort her while we go get what you really need from Ashford's office. Cole felt his stomach drop. How do you know about that? Because I've been inside that office, seen the safe behind that mountain painting, the evidence she's carrying. He nodded toward Abigail. That's good. But the full records are what will hang Ashford. Patient files showing the deaths, supply invoices, payment records. We need all of it. Abigail climbed down from the wagon, moving stiffly. You lost your sister to the tonic. Her voice was quiet but certain. I'm sorry. My husband died trying to stop this. If you're offering help, I accept it. But I won't let anyone else die for this cause. Nathan studied her for a long moment, then nodded with respect. The risk is ours to choose, Dr. Carter. My sister's death, that's on Ashford. What happens next, that's on us. Running Bear, the elder cousin, moved his horse forward. We'll take the little one to safety. The Jenkins house? Cole hesitated only a moment, then turned to Emma. She'd been silent through the whole exchange, understanding that something important was being decided. Emma, sweetheart. Cole lifted her down, kneeling in the snow. You're going to go with these men to Mrs. Jenkins' house. They're friends of mine. You'll be safe with them. But Papa, what about you? I have to help Dr. Abby with something important, something dangerous. But I'll come back for you soon as I can. Few days at most, Emma's lower lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she unfastened the chain around her neck. The small silver locket Cole had given her, containing a tiny portrait of Margaret. She pressed it into his hand. So Mama can watch over you. The gesture nearly undid Cole completely. He pulled his daughter into a fierce embrace. I love you, Emma Margaret Brennan. You're the bravest person I know. I love you too, Papa. Come back safe. Running Bear helped Emma onto his horse, settling her securely. Standing Wolf moved close on the other side, forming a protective barrier. Without another word, the two riders turned towards Silver Ridge and disappeared into the thinning snow. Cole stood watching until they vanished completely, his daughter's locket clutched in his fist. When he finally turned back, Nathan and Abigail were watching him with expressions of understanding. All right, Cole's voice was rough. What's the plan? Nathan pulled out a pocket watch. Nearly 8 o'clock. Hospital will have minimal staff. One doctor on call, maybe 2 nurses, plus guards. The office is on the second floor, west wing. Main entrance is always watched. We use the loading dock and back. I still have my key to that door, Abigail said with certainty. Jonathan had it made for me for night emergencies. Ashford probably changed the office locks, but I doubt he remembered the loading dock. Smart, Nathan approved. So we go in through the loading dock, up the service stairs, into his office. Get the evidence. Get out. They worked quickly, abandoning the broken wagon. Nathan had brought spare horses, and soon they were mounted and moving towards Silver Ridge. The snow had stopped entirely, clouds breaking apart to reveal brilliant stars and moonlight that turned the landscape silver. They approached from the north, using cover, staying hidden. Silver Ridge sprawled below, perhaps 200 buildings clustered around the main street. Lamplight glowed in windows. From this distance, it looked peaceful. Cole knew better. They left the horses in a grove of cottonwoods a quarter-mile from the hospital. Nathan checked his weapons methodically, a heavy Sharps rifle and a Remington revolver. Cole did the same with his Springfield and Colt. Abigail carried the small revolver Cole had given her, handling it with growing confidence. Remember, Nathan's voice was quiet but intense. Once we're inside, no talking unless necessary. Hand signals only. If something goes wrong, we scatter and meet back at the horses. They moved through darkened streets like ghosts, staying to shadows. The town was far from quiet. Saturday night in a mining town meant saloons did brisk business. A fight broke out in front of the Lucky Strike, drawing a crowd. Perfect cover. The hospital stood on the eastern edge of town, a substantial 2-story building. At night, with only a few lamps burning, it looked less welcoming, more institutional. They circled to the loading dock on the north side. Abigail produced her key and fitted it to the lock. For a terrible moment, Cole thought it wouldn't work. Then it turned with a soft click and the door swung inward. The smell hit them immediately. Carbolic acid, harsh and chemical. Underneath that, blood and bile, the unavoidable odors of a hospital. Cole's stomach turned, old war memories surging up. They were in a narrow hallway, dimly lit, serving as the receiving area for medical supplies. Crates lined one wall. Abigail led the way with confidence, knowing every corner. Service stairs at the end. They climbed in single file, Cole bringing up the rear. At the second floor landing, Abigail paused, listening. Somewhere distant, a man coughed. Closer, the tick of a clock. Otherwise, silence. West wing, Abigail pointed. Third door. They moved like smoke down the corridor. Past closed doors. Doctor's lounge. Medical records. Then they were there. A heavy oak door with a brass plate. V. Ashford, hospital administrator. Locked, naturally. Nathan produced lockpicks, delicate metal tools. His fingers moved with practiced ease. Less than 2 minutes, and the lock clicked open. The office beyond was opulent. Thick carpet, mahogany furniture, oil paintings on wood-paneled walls. A massive desk dominated the space. Behind it hung a large landscape painting showing the Rockies at sunset. Abigail moved straight to the painting. She lifted it away, revealing the safe beneath. A Mosler and Company model, brass and steel, probably 300 pounds. Her hands moved to the dial with absolute certainty. 12 right, 36 left, 9 right. The tumblers clicked into alignment. The handle turned and the heavy door swung open. Inside were stacks of ledgers bound in black leather, wooden boxes, bundles of papers, and a slim journal bound in blue leather. Abigail pulled out the ledgers first, selecting 3. Then the boxes, which contained glass vials of amber liquid. Dr. Ashford's miracle tonic. Finally, with trembling hands, she withdrew the blue journal. Jonathan's personal journal. Her voice was barely audible. Everything is in here. Every suspicious death he investigated. Every patient who came in addicted. Every conversation, every document he copied. This is what got him killed. Then we make sure it counts. Nathan was already stuffing everything into a canvas sack. Move quickly now. But as they turned to leave, something caught Cole's eye. A photograph in a silver frame on the desk. A boy, perhaps 10 years old, smiling at the camera. Dark hair, bright eyes, one leg ending in a wooden prosthesis below the knee. Cole turned the frame over, an inscription on the back. Thomas James Ashford, Jr., born 1858, died 1868, forever loved, forever missed. Ashford had a son. Cole's voice was quiet. He died young. Abigail looked at the photo, comprehension dawning. 10 years old. That would have been 68. The year before we arrived, before the hospital was built, before modern medicine came to Silver Ridge. Nathan had seen it too. Back then, if a child got badly injured, there wasn't much hope, especially for something like a leg amputation. The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. Ashford had lost his son to medical incompetence or bad luck. That grief had twisted into something dark. If he couldn't save his own son, he'd make his own medicine. Never mind that it was poisoning people. This doesn't change what he's done. Abigail's voice was hard. Grief doesn't excuse 47 murders. No, Cole agreed, setting the photo back carefully. But it explains it. They were turning to leave when they heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy boots, multiple sets, coming closer. Then voices. Boss said check every room. That was Eli Tanner's drawl, unmistakable. If they're in the building, we find them. The 3 of them froze. Nathan moved to the door, pressing his ear against it. When he turned back, his expression was grim. At least 4 men. Coming this way. Window. Cole was already moving. He tested the sash. Locked, but simple. He forced it with his knife, the wood splintering with a small crack. The window swung open and cold air rushed in. It's a 2-story drop. Abigail was looking down. We'll break our legs. Better than what Tanner will do if he catches us. Nathan threw out the evidence sack. It landed with a soft whump in a snowdrift below. Cole went first, hanging from the sill to shorten the drop, then letting go. The impact jolted through his bones, his bad knees screaming, but nothing broke. He rolled away, coming up with his rifle ready. Abigail came next, and Cole caught her, cushioning her fall. She gasped in pain as it jarred her shoulder, but stayed on her feet. Nathan dropped last, landing with easy grace. Above them, shouts. Someone had discovered the open window. A gunshot cracked. The bullet struck brick near Cole's head, chips stinging his face. He returned fire through the window, not aiming, just making them duck. They ran, grabbing the evidence sack, staying low. Behind them, more shouts, more gunfire. Nathan wheeled and fired his sharps. Someone screamed. They reached the cottonwood grove at a dead run. The horses were there, pawing nervously. They mounted in seconds. Go! Nathan kicked his horse. Head north. Follow the creek. But Nathan, I'll lead them away. Nathan was already wheeling back toward town, firing his rifle in the air, making noise. Follow the creek to the first fork. Take the west branch. There's a line cabin 5 miles up that trail. Wait for me there, Nathan! Cole tried to protest, but his friend was already riding hard towards Silver Ridge, drawing pursuit away from them. Damn him. Cole turned his horse north. Come on! They rode hard through darkness, branches whipping their faces, snow flying from their horses' hooves. Behind them, sounds of pursuit grew louder, then began to fade as Nathan's diversion worked. The creek was easy to find, a dark ribbon cutting through white landscape. They followed it north, letting the horses pick their way along the bank. Behind them, torches spread out from Silver Ridge, but they seemed to concentrate east and south, following Nathan's false trail. They rode for another hour until they reached the fork. The west branch was narrower, climbing into rougher country. The line cabin appeared like a blessing, a small dark square against the snow. Cole checked the cabin carefully before allowing Abigail inside. Empty, just a simple structure. One room with a stone fireplace and a rough bunk. He got a fire going while Abigail tended the horses. They sat in silence, catching their breath. Cole's knee throbbed. Abigail's face was tight with pain from her shoulder. But they were alive. They had the evidence. As they waited in the cabin that first night, a soft knock came at the door near midnight. Cole's hand went to his rifle, but through the window he recognized Running Bear's silhouette. The Blackfoot warrior stepped inside, snow dusting his shoulders. The little one is safe with the Jenkins family. Standing Wolf remains to watch over her. Mrs. Jenkins sends word that Emma ate well and is sleeping peacefully. She asked about you, but Mrs. Jenkins told her you were on an important mission and would return soon. Cole felt a weight lift from his chest. Thank you for everything. Running Bear nodded once. The child has courage. She did not cry, even when frightened. You have raised her well. He melted back into the night as silently as he'd come. Do you think Nathan made it? Abigail finally asked. If anyone could, it's him. Cole's answer was more confident than he felt. That man has survived worse than Ashford's hired guns. They waited through the long night, taking turns sleeping and watching the fire. When dawn finally broke, there was still no sign of Nathan. Cole was beginning to seriously worry when he heard it. A single horse approaching slowly. He grabbed his rifle and positioned himself by the door. But when the rider came into view, relief flooded through him. Nathan sat his paint pony, looking tired but unhurt. His grin was fierce, led them on a merry chase halfway to the territorial border. Nathan's voice was hoarse but victorious. By the time they figured out the ruse, you two were long gone. You took a hell of a risk. Cole helped the older man down. We're all taking risks now. Nathan moved to the fire, accepting coffee. Question is, what's our next move? Ashford knows we have the evidence. He'll be hunting us with everything he's got. We head for Helena. Cole had been thinking about this all night. Get the evidence to the federal marshal there. Helena's 100 miles west, Nathan pointed out. Through mountain passes probably snowed in. And Ashford will have every road watched. Then we don't take the roads. We go overland through the high country, use the old Blackfoot trails. Nathan considered this. It could work. Brutal in winter, but passable. We'd need supplies, though. Food, warmer clothing, ammunition. What about that logging camp you mentioned? Olaf's camp. Nathan nodded. Good man. It's on our route, about 15 miles northwest. 2 days hard riding. He'd help us. Then that's our next destination. Cole's mind moved forward. We rest here today, leave at first light tomorrow. They spent the day preparing, checking equipment, tending wounds. Abigail's shoulder needed fresh bandaging. Cole's knee required wrapping. Nathan's ribs were bruised but not broken. As evening fell, Cole found himself thinking about Emma. Was she safe with the Jenkins family? The not knowing was agony. She's safe, Abigail seemed to sense his thoughts. Your daughter, I can feel it. How can you be sure? Because that's what good people do when children need protecting. And there are still good people in this world. Cole hoped she was right. They left at dawn the next morning, 3 riders heading northwest through wilderness that grew progressively wilder. The landscape climbed, gaining elevation, the air growing thinner and colder. The horses labored in deep snow. Late on the second day, they spotted smoke rising from a valley ahead. The logging operation was small, maybe 20 men cutting timber. Nathan rode in first to make sure of their welcome. He returned an hour later with good news. Camp boss is willing to help. Olaf Svensson. He'll provide fresh horses and supplies in exchange for Nathan's paint pony and payment later. They stayed one night at the logging camp. Olaf Svensson was a mountain of a man, 6'4", with shoulders like an ox and a beard that reached his chest. Norwegian by birth, he'd come to Montana 20 years ago and built this operation from nothing. He clasped Nathan's hand like they were brothers, then turned sharp blue eyes on Cole and Abigail. Nathan says you're running from Ashford's men. Good. That bastard killed my nephew with his poison tonic last year. He spat in the snow. You take what you need, my horses, my supplies. Just promise me you'll see him hang. We will, Cole said simply. Olaf nodded once. Then we have a deal. Sleeping in a bunkhouse that smelled of pine sap and honest sweat, the loggers asked no questions. In the morning, they left with fresh mounts, full saddlebags, and directions for the next stage. But as they rode out, Cole noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh tracks in the snow leading toward the camp from the east. Tracks made by multiple horses, less than a day old. Someone was following them, getting closer. Nathan saw them too, his expression hardened. Ashford's men. Probably Tanner. They're tracking us. How many? Cole studied the tracks. 6, maybe 8. Nathan read the snow like a book. Moving fast. They'll reach the camp by tonight. Can we outrun them? Not loaded down like this. Not with the passes ahead. Nathan looked at the evidence sack. But we can't abandon this. Then we make a stand. Cole's voice was firm. Choose ground that favors us. Make them pay for every inch. There is a place. Nathan pointed northwest. Narrow canyon 3 miles ahead. Only one way through. We could hold it. They rode hard for those 3 miles, pushing the fresh horses. The canyon appeared as Nathan described. Steep rock walls on either side. A narrow passage barely wide enough for 2 horses abreast. Perfect defensible position. They positioned themselves on high ground, flanking the entrance. Nathan with his long-range sharps on one side. Cole with his Springfield on the other. Abigail held the horses back in the canyon, out of the line of fire. We wait. Nathan chambered around. Let them come to us. The wait was agonizing. An hour passed, then another. The sun climbed higher, though it gave little warmth. Cole's fingers grew numb despite his gloves. Then he heard it, the jingle of harness, the soft crunch of hooves in snow. They were coming. 8 riders appeared, moving cautiously. Eli Tanner led them, his scarred face alert for danger. They approached the canyon entrance slowly, sensing the trap but seeing no alternative route. Nathan fired first. The big sharps boomed like thunder. One rider fell from his saddle. The others scattered, seeking cover, returning fire blindly. Cole picked his targets carefully. His Springfield cracked once, twice. Another man fell. The riders were pinned down, unable to advance or retreat safely. The fight lasted 20 minutes. Methodical. Brutal. When it was over, 3 of Ashford's men lay dead in the snow. Eli Tanner was among them, the scarred enforcer finally meeting justice at the end of Cole's rifle. The others had retreated, carrying their wounded, abandoning the pursuit without their leader. Nathan climbed down from his position, reloading methodically. That'll slow them, buy us time. How much time? Cole asked. Day, maybe 2. Nathan's face was grim, but Ashford won't stop. He'll send more men. Then we keep moving. We reach Helena before he can organize another pursuit. They rode through the afternoon and into the evening, putting distance between themselves and the canyon. That night they camped cold, no fire, eating jerky and hardtack. Too dangerous to make their position visible. The next 3 days were the hardest Cole had ever experienced. They pushed through mountain passes where snow reached the horses' chests, the animals struggling for every yard gained. Temperatures dropped to 40 below. Cole's war-damaged knee threatened to give out with every hour, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on. On the second day, they nearly lost Abigail when her horse stumbled on hidden ice. Only Nathan's quick reflexes, grabbing her reins at the last moment, kept both horse and rider from tumbling into a ravine that dropped 300 feet. They survived on jerky so frozen they had to thaw it in their mouths, and coffee so weak it was barely colored water. At night, they huddled together for warmth in whatever shelter they could find. A rock overhang, a dense stand of pines, once a snow cave Nathan dug with his bare hands. But they survived. They kept moving. And Nathan's knowledge of the country proved invaluable, guiding them along trails that existed more in memory than reality. On the 4th day, civilization appeared. A road, a town in the distance. Helena. They rode in at dusk, 3 exhausted riders on spent horses. The federal marshal's office was on the main street. Cole and Nathan helped Abigail down. She clutched the canvas sack with the evidence. Inside, a gray-haired man looked up from his desk. Marshal Robert Hollister. Can I help you? My name is Dr. Abigail Carter. This is Cole Brennan and Nathan Cross. We have evidence of a conspiracy to distribute poisonous drugs, resulting in at least 47 deaths. We need federal protection, and we need to file charges against Victor Ashford of Silver Ridge. Hollister's expression grew serious as he examined the ledgers, read Jonathan's journal, studied the payment records. "This is extensive," he looked up. "You're safe now. I'll have deputies escort you to a hotel. Tomorrow we'll take your formal statements." That night, in a clean hotel room with actual beds, Cole finally allowed himself to relax. They'd done it. The evidence was in official hands. Ashford couldn't bury this now. 3 weeks later, federal marshals arrested Victor Ashford in Silver Ridge. The charges were extensive: conspiracy, murder, drug trafficking, bribery. The trial would take months, but the outcome was certain. Cole rode back to Silver Ridge to collect Emma. The Jenkins family had cared for her well, but she flew into his arms the moment she saw him. "You came back," she cried. "You promised, and you came back. Always, sweetheart. Always." That evening at the Jenkins house, Abigail joined them. Emma's face lit up when she saw her. "Dr. Abby!" "You're staying?" Abigail knelt down. "If your father will have me, I thought I might open a practice here. This territory needs honest doctors." Cole met her eyes over Emma's head. "We'd be honored to have you stay. For as long as you want." Emma hugged them both. "We're a family now. Right, Papa?" Cole looked at this brave woman who'd fought for justice, at his remarkable daughter, and felt something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Hope. "Yes, sweetheart. We're a family." 6 months later, Victor Ashford was executed for his crimes. His pharmaceutical network was dismantled. The hospital was reorganized under new management with Abigail Carter as chief physician. Cole and Abigail were married that spring in a small ceremony at the ranch. Emma served as flower girl, wearing a dress the color of Montana sky. Nathan Cross stood as best man, proud and fierce. They built a life together on that ranch. Abigail practiced medicine, riding out to treat patients across the territory. Cole worked the land and raised Emma with love and care. They had 3 more children over the years: Thomas, Margaret, and Jonathan. Each name a remembrance, a honoring of those who'd come before. On winter nights, when snow fell soft and silent, Emma would tell her younger siblings the story: how Papa found Mama in a blizzard, how they fought bad men and won, how courage and justice could triumph even in the darkest times. And Cole, listening from his chair by the fire, would catch Abigail's eye across the room and know that some storms brought not just destruction, but salvation. That sometimes the coldest winters led to the warmest springs. That love could bloom again, even in hearts that had known profound loss. Nathan Cross lived another 20 years, dying peacefully in his sleep at 78. He never took another wife after his first passed, but he was never alone. The Brennan house was always open to him, and he spent his final years teaching Emma's children the ways of the wilderness, passing on knowledge that would outlive them all. The ranch prospered. The family grew. And on clear winter nights, when stars blazed overhead in that vast Montana sky, 3 generations would stand together and remember. Remember a woman who survived impossible odds, a man who risked everything for justice, a child who showed courage beyond her years, and an old scout who proved that family wasn't just blood, but choice and loyalty and love. The winter of 1878 became legend in Silver Ridge. The winter when good people stood against corruption and won. When a doctor's widow and a cowboy father and a Blackfoot scout changed the course of a territory. When justice, imperfect and hard won, finally prevailed. And Emma Brennan, who would become Montana's first female chief of surgery in 1910, would tell her own children and grandchildren that everything good in her life began that night when her father found an angel sleeping in the snow. Not because angels don't exist, she'd say, but because sometimes they arrive looking like us, broken and frightened and in desperate need of help. And our job is to recognize them, to offer shelter, to stand beside them when darkness closes in. Because that's what family does. That's what good people do. That's how the world gets saved, one act of courage at a time. And in the quiet of those Montana nights, with wind whispering through the pines and snow falling soft as grace, that lesson echoed down through generations. A reminder that even in the hardest times, even in the coldest winters, hope survives, love endures, and sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, the angels you save will save you right back. The end of winter always comes. Spring always follows. And those who survived the storm together built something stronger than they could have built alone. That was the lesson of 1878. That remains the lesson still.